welcome to this show of the Next Big Win. It's great to be back with you. And for your next big win, we're going to be exploring how to price it and how to look at competitive analysis, do the market research, and all of those things so that when you actually launch and you go for it, you're in a really good place. And actually, what do we charge? How much should we be pricing this at is one of the most common questions we're asked, isn't it, Mahmood, when people want to launch something new?
Big conundrum. And unless you're a mind reader that you can go into the mind if you're a consumer, a customer, there's some science, there's some stuff that goes on between there, strategy, all that is to come, folks, after we get the blood circulating around your system. Should we get some music, Jack?
Let's go for it.
Let's do it. And here we are, back in the room.
You always stop it at a different place every time, so I'm always still just
mid gyration,
mid dance move. Yeah, I don't know if it's a gyration. I wouldn't go that far, but
yours is a dance move. Mine is more of a robotics type, football player type dance.
Yeah. So I do like our music. So yes, back to your next big win, and you've got the idea and you've done all the things we said in the previous shows about making sure you're super clear on it. You've done quite a bit of testing and all of those things. And now you're thinking, well, okay, let's get focused on pricing. Let's talk money and think about all of those things, because it's only going to be your next big win if it at least covers your cost and preferably makes a profit.
100%. And folks, if you've seen anything about that, there is some element of science, there is some element of number work, there's element of psychology, but there is no such thing as a one size fits all. There are a minimum about at least 20 ways to price something. Typically, a lot of companies, when they're launching new products, new services, will do a bundle. There'll be a blend of pricing approaches adopted, but ultimately driven by what the objectives of that launch will be, and that subsequent sort of market development as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's going to be really interesting to explore this. And when I think of some of the recent questions that we've been asked about pricing, one of the most recent ones was if you've got different outlets in different locations, do you have to charge the same price in all of them, or should you adopt a different price according to local market conditions and so on? Should we launch something and go in really low and drive adoption and drive numbers, or should we price it really high because it's harder to drop prices later? So we get lots of questions, don't we, about it? What are some of the most common questions that you get asked?
Yeah, I think very much so. I think the question normally starts with, how much should I charge for this here? My normal response is, it depends what you want to achieve. It depends if you want to, just as you said, as a launch phase. I'm just thinking two big examples that come to mind. So, do you remember when the iPads first came out, Joe?
Yeah.
Apple at that time took a conscious choice, knowing that there are a group of people out there, a group of buyers who are the must-have this product buy, and they're happy to pay a premium, or as long as they're the ones who first get that product. And they deliberately, I think it's around about $100 over the price. They charged a premium because they knew those early adopters would want that particular model, and they consciously built in, as time went on, that they would start reducing the price. If you're somebody who wants to get a big market share, and you think, do you know what, I actually want market share and I'm worried about the profitability, then you're going to go for a low price penetration pricing, something of that nature. So yeah, very common question, and the answer depends on, what is it you're looking to do.
Yeah, sure. And the psychology of pricing. So we're going to cover all of those things, and in this show and in future show as well. But it starts with, actually, I think, doing your market research, because for me, the best price is one where you feel like, yeah, I'm making some good money on that. And the customer also feels, actually, that's a fair price. Yeah, that's good value. Now, by good value, that doesn't mean cheap. Okay, value is not the same as being cheap or inexpensive. What we mean by value is that people feel it's worth the money that they're paying for it. And that's the sweet spot, isn't it? Where you're getting a good return, you're feeling like you're getting fair value in terms of the money you're receiving, and the customer feels like, yeah, it's worth paying this.
Yeah, I think that's a split point there, Joe. I'm thinking, actually, maybe because I'm getting hungry, actually, I'm thinking about a restaurant, anyone in the food and hospitality business, if they're thinking of launching a brand new sort of food outlet, a new meal, a new offer. Typically, it's one of those things, isn't it? Because a food, in general terms, if you're going out to eat, is an experience here. And if you charge too little, people will perceive that it's of a low value quality, and therefore the offer that you're making doesn't quite stack up. If you price it a little bit on the high side, if people like the experience, they like the food, and they like the service, and they like the ambience, they tend not to worry too much about the price there as well. So I think that balance, your point is a great one about price it too low, price it too cheaply, it can actually be counterproductive. And it's about the value and the client's eyes. And it makes me think about something called target pricing, which I'm going to pick up later on.
Yeah, because it depends on a few things as well. So, it depends on the strength of your brand. So, if you are a well-known brand in your field, and this could be services, by the way, all of this applies to services as well as product. So whatever your business is, whether it's business to business, business to consumer, all of this is relevant. So yeah, so it's about thinking about that. But also thinking, where is your product going to be sold? So for instance, if you went to the corner shop and bought a can of Diet Coke, you would expect it to cost I don't know. I don't drink Diet Coke, but what would you expect it to cost, Mahmood? I don't know.
I don't drink Diet Coke as well. I'm guessing around about 80p to a pound.
80p to a pound. Is that around about $1, something like that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, if you were staying in a 4 or 5 star hotel in central London and you bought that same can of Diet Coke from the minibar, we might expect to pay, that could be like 2-3 times the amount. And we would expect to pay that just because of where we are, and the situation and the convenience for it. So there's lots of different factors coming into play. There's what are other people charging for similar things? What do customers expect to pay? And if you're going to be different from that, how and why, and how you're going to communicate that? What strength of payment and margin can your brand hold, and what sort of environment is the customer buying in, and what's their affordability levels as well? So all of those things, pricing is a really complex thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I don't know about your experience here. We accept it's quite a complex array of variables that come into determine the price, and a price that might be modified over time. I'm not sure if I'm that convinced actually that a lot of business owners actually spend the time and the energy actually trying to think about those variables and how they impact on price. They will either go by what I call like a cost-based model. They'll either go, think of a number, pluck it out there, that seems reasonable, and charge that. So I'm not sure how much the thinking actually goes into the actual price they're going to charge for their first, dip toe in the water. I mean, what's your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more, because I agree with you. It's either cost plus, which is it costs us X to make or provide this, and we're going to add on 50%, 30%, 10%, whatever, and that's going to be the price. That's straightforward. You're covering your costs and all of those things, but is it competitive in the market? Are you getting as much as you could be for it, or whatever? So there's a few things to watch out for around that. And then there's the other approach, which is how much do I think I can get away with?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be, if it's too high, then that obviously puts people off. And often I find it's people aren't charging enough. They're not valuing the services, the products enough. They haven't got that confidence. So they always feel rude, asking for too much. So and it depends on what it is. If you're a social enterprise and you're trying to provide something that's value for money, your values, your business values, and your business purpose are coming into it as well. So, but this is why it needs some thought, and I think it's about being deliberate and intentional with pricing, and it's not about getting it perfectly right, but it's getting it in the some sort of ballpark that really works, I think.
Yeah, I think you're perfectly right. And it's weird actually, because there's 2 or 3 variations of pricing that you mentioned there. So if you look at something like cost plus pricing, I think the key things, a couple of things there. Yes, it's a good, easy, straightforward mechanism, but it really depends what sort of costs you're taking on board when you price it up as well. Because you can make some element of understanding what those costs going forward will be. Whether you're going to be talking, apologies for throwing in the language, folks, if you're listening, whether you're talking about the costs that are committed, whether you're talking about the costs of the actually producing one extra product, one extra service. There's that element, and a lot of businesses may not have that information to hand. Customers I think, are quite indifferent to your costs anyway. They're not really going to say, by the way, I'm not paying X because it only costs you Y. Cost is an internal conversation more than an external conversation. So I think that's quite problematic. And I think it resonates with something we talked about last week, isn't it? When you talk about launching a new idea, if you don't test it, if you don't ask customers, if you don't find out the impact it has on them, you tend to come up with something you think is going to work, but it's based on all your own thoughts and nobody else's thoughts. So it's it's the same, I think, sometimes with pricing.
Yeah, so just a bit of strategy, and it doesn't take years and years to work this sort of stuff out. So I think a really good starting point is to do some competitor analysis and some market research. So market research is about looking at customers, customer behaviour, and so on. And the competitor analysis is clearly about looking at competitors, other businesses, and what they're offering for those customers and how much for in that space. And sometimes businesses will say, well, I've got so many competitors, or I've got no competitors, because this is we've always got competitors. We need to look at if the customer doesn't buy your thing, what are the customer's choices if the customer is going to buy something, and look at those, and at least be clear in terms of what's the average price, what's the lowest, what's the highest, what's the most frequently charged, what's the difference between a product that's slightly more expensive than the others, and be really clear in terms of what that landscape is. I don't think that's a big thing to do. I think it's a fairly straightforward thing to do. Now, the only exception to that is in business to business services, particularly, as well as product, where people are doing things on contract by negotiation and the prices aren't published. So then it's about intelligence, it's about talking to customers, understanding where they think you are in the market, and if they think you're a bit higher than everybody else, are they getting the value that they would expect? So sometimes I'll work with businesses, customers, and talk to customers on behalf of businesses, and and learn things like that. That can be really, really useful and insightful. So if you're going to charge more, you've got to be able to at least be able to communicate what it is about your product or service that's worth it.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I think there's 2 things I'll pull out from that. If I think about the B2C space, that's selling, when you talk about people talk about competition, it's not a replica, it's not a like for like, it's a comparable. So if I think about the hospitality sector, if you've got a restaurant or a bar, you're not actually looking at what other bars will necessarily charge. It may be that somebody's supposed to go to the cinema that evening, go to the theatre, goes and do something where they have an enjoyable experience here. That's who you're competing against. You're not necessarily comparing, if you're a corner store, comparing yourself to a big chain of supermarkets, because that's not a like for like comparison here. So you're right, it's somebody where else they can spend that money. But I think that B2B conversation, Joe, I don't know if you find it as well, it's when people give a price to a client here, they sometimes miss a trick because they don't ask enough questions of that client, what the client's looking for. They might lead in with a direct conversation about price, but if they understand what the client wants, what the business wants, what they're trying to get out of that, the problem they've got, and then they can blend that solution, they're likely to be able to charge a higher premium for the service they're offering anyway.
Yeah, because it's about matching, showing how you're solving the problem, matching your solution to what the client wants. And when the solution matches the problem that the client has, then that has greater value, and you can reflect that in the pricing for sure, definitely. And I think the other thing I would say is, and you're you're brilliant at this, is about understanding your own money mindset and how that's influencing and the unconscious bias we all have about the role of money, confidence with money, what money means, all of that stuff actually affects how we choose to price in our businesses.
Absolutely.
And that money mindset are things that we've, behaviors and decisions that we've learned from other people in our lives, people who raised us, rather than actually being, if we were to start from scratch and not have any of that, would we believe many of the things we believe about money? Probably not.
No, probably not. As you said, they're rooted in terms of, you may have some people who've never actually worked before, for example, until they actually start their own business, start their own full-time first job. It may be a topic that's never discussed at home. I think in some people, money is quite a vulgar, dirty subject anyhow. For me, I just see it as a medium of exchange between two parties saying, this is what I'm going to provide you, this is what somebody's going to say, yeah, great, that's what I need. There's going to be a monetary exchange, it's a value exchange. But yeah, I think that people's reluctance to deal with money, I think they should worry less about the physicality of it, but it's about that ability to continue doing your why, that the ability to serve your client there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see yourself, Joe, in terms of dealing with money? Are you comfortable with dealing with it?
Oh, it's a work in progress all the time, and I don't think we all get it right 100% of the time. I find it easier doing it for other people than I do for myself, like so many of us do about so many things. I wrote quite an in-depth article a while ago for my business called, which was about how to talk about price confidently with clients, and that's something I've learned to do much better, because I think clients, in a business-to-business environment or a face-to-face environment or online or whatever, it's really important to have the open conversation rather than just hiding things behind emails and in documents and those sorts of things. And and for it to be a neutral conversation, not or even a positive conversation, not something to worry about, because you can go in and explain all the amazing things that you do, and the client's really interested in those, but at the back of the mind they might be thinking, well, this all sounds fantastic, how much is it going to be? And so just get that out there, clear the air, find out about the budget, ask the questions, and then you can be flexible in terms of matching your offer to the client's budget as well. So it's appropriate there. But I think you've also got to be really clear on, I think the supermodels in the 90s used to do this. What's your, I'm not going to get out of bed for less than X amount of money. I'm not going to sell this product or service for less than this. What's your bottom line? Where's your ideal place to be? And where, if you're offering loads of value and, offering all sorts of great stuff for the client, what's sort of the top end that you might want to ask for and why?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I would say there's two or three things. One, you've obviously got to understand your numbers, but I think that could be a topic we're going to pick up later on in our broadcast. It's about having that confidence of knowing what's that walkaway number. What's the number that says if I go below this, that's just silly for financial reasons as well as other reasons. I think it's having that confidence, because I think once you start diddling about price, and I have seen it happen where people quote a price and literally you have an objection received, and they will dramatically drop that price down here. I think that sends out the wrong signal to the buyer, because it's thinking, hang on, is there something quite not quite right about the price that you gave me in the first place? I always encourage clients, I'm probably poor at doing it myself, I always encourage clients to have money as part of the initial conversation, not a conversation, it's not a topic that's brought in several weeks down the track or several steps. Talk about it at the beginning. Maybe not your opening line, but you've got to have it there. You're going to say with confidence. Don't feel timid about it. Don't be scared about it. The worst thing that can happen is a client will say, "Okay, why?" or challenge the price. And if you can justify it and explain it, it puts you in a strong position. I know about you since we've worked together, since we've known each other. You don't actually do things for money's sake. Money comes as a consequence of what you do there as well, and you charge a fair value, it probably slightly under for what you're worth there as well. But that's taken several years to get to that stage.
Yeah, that's the that's the aim, and I do help people out, you know, to just to help them out without any fee as well, quite often. But that's my contribution. You know, we want to contribute in other ways as a responsible business, for social enterprises and startups and so on. But I think it's what I also notice. It's not just when I think you're absolutely right. People get an objection and then they completely, you know, drop the price or whatever. It's also people drop the price before they've had any objection, so they'd go, "This is the price," and then they get a bit scared, and then they go, "But you know, I'm going to discount it, and it's only going to be this because
hiding behind their
it's
hands.
Wednesday or Thursday or whatever day of the week it is, you know."
Yeah.
So and they talk themselves down before the client. The client is just watching you. You know, you said it was this, and
They can just be quiet and they can watch the price tumble before the end of the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a bit market stall, which is great. You know, it works on a market stall. I'm not giving you one bucket for it's not £1, it's not 50p, it's this, which is great. That works for selling buckets. But if you're not selling buckets, you want to watch that. Yeah.
Yes, so folks, if a bucket is not your next big win, by the way, then obviously that's not a good strategy. And look, folks, if you're just coming across the broadcast, well, they put hashtag replay in there. Me and Joe always pick up the comments and feedback. And before we carry on with the conversation, I have no embarrassment about this. Do check out the Next Big Win website. There it comes across. It's a fantastic quiz there on about leadership skills and all the rest of it. Have a feel, have a look at it. There's some great stuff coming up on the Next Big Win website. So obviously we would recommend you to actually have a look at that. And we talked about free the buckets, by the way. It made me think about something called a pricing approach called freemium, where you don't actually charge initially for that thing getting in there, which is okay, can work. You might be then looking to charge on grades, follow-up, support services. You've got that foot in the door. You might want to charge people nothing to begin with. As long as you've got the cash flow resources to cover any costs of doing that. I normally find I'm not a big fan normally on doing things at a very low price and then trying to move it upwards, because I think you set yourself a marker in that respect there as well. So that becomes very difficult to move pricing up if you go in a very low entry price.
Yeah, it's like also it's there's that, or is this too good to be true? So if you're offering something that's amazing and you're underselling it you're underpricing it, it does raise doubt in people's minds. Is this too good to be true? There must be something wrong with it, or it wouldn't be this inexpensive.
Absolutely. And the function you might be picking up on here, by the way, is not unusual. We talk about I mentioned the Apple example earlier on. That's a premium price at the beginning because they must have the early adopters here. But they consciously knew that over a period of time, as the marketplace bought more iPads, as the customer base grew, purely by the logic of numbers here, the cost of actually producing and providing those iPads, we're going to say constant, the unit cost comes down. They could afford to drop the price down as time went on, but they knew they would still generate good, healthy margins there as well.
Yeah, because there's something with, for you listening and watching, for your next big win is that don't try and overload and recoup all the investment costs you've put into your next big win too early. What I do is I see people try and recoup everything and then charge too much and launch too high because of the investment costs that have gone in. Some things will be able to stand it and some things won't. So if you've been investing over time and you've invested a significant amount, you're not going to get it back usually within the first month to 3 months of launching. It's probably spreading getting that investment back. I mean, Mahmood, you're more of an expert on investment and getting your money back and those sorts of things than I am. But is that right, or is that?
That's right. Actually, I'd actually put a longer time scale on it. They've done some studies here, and there are 2 investment horizons here. There's called the initial planning horizon, and typically most companies would not expect to make any sort of real value generated for the first 3 to 5 years. And logically, that makes a lot of sense because that's the period of time we've got a very low customer base. Customers don't know who you are, they don't trust you. It takes time to get some confidence. You've got initial setup costs, the ongoing costs. So 3 to 5 years of that planning horizon, very little value is generated. After that 5 years has gone by, you'll make value. And I'm just thinking about Sky, for example. When Sky first launched here, it was hemorrhaging cash, had high amounts of capital infrastructure costs, large amounts of borrowing. The subscription base wasn't that significant at that point in time. And I know Sky's got some challenges nowadays, but actually it took about 5, 6 years here before they actually got to that point of saying, okay, we can see a reduction in the debt, we can see some economies of scale coming in here, and then they start to generate some value there as well.
Yeah, it's about getting that critical mass, because Amazon is a similar example. Lots and lots of investment, not a lot of return coming out the other side for a very, very long time. So that really was a leap of faith as well, in a way, but and resilience and staying true to the vision. So I mean, it depends what it is, doesn't it, as well, and how new the thing is, and how much it's costing you to get there. I think. So but hopefully you've tried the product. You might have done some of the things we talked about before in terms of having waiting lists available and talking to customers and doing all the research, and then you can pitch it at the right level, and then you'll drive the volume. But it needs all sorts of things. It needs the marketing and communication and everything else to go behind it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think, Joe, I think this is a topic we're going to have to pick up and carry on with next week. But it also requires you to actually do a forecast and a plan and get some numbers put together here. So typically, whether you look at what's going to happen as far as you know, where you estimate your marketing activity will take you over the next 3 to 5 years, and plug those numbers in and actually model it to see where those pressure points are, it makes that looking into the future much easier, much less stressful. If you don't plan, you just go by fingers crossed and hope it will work. That's a very stressful way of launching anything.
Yeah, and by keeping your price, I correct myself, by keeping your costs as low as possible, without compromising what you want to do on the launch and with your product or service, then you give yourself more scope. If you don't hit the volumes you were hoping for, then you've got a little bit of cover there. You've launched in a really lean and cost efficient way. And if you do better than you hoped, then there's more margin to reinvest back into the business or do whatever it is you want to do with it. So keeping your costs low, I think having a high priced product is not an excuse for not managing costs.
Yeah, 100%. And folks, you find also there's a correlation and connection with what me and Joe have talked about in previous broadcasts here about the MVP, making sure that it's market acceptable and all the rest of it. If you do that, it actually minimizes and reduces the investment cost of getting the product built, getting the product launched as well, because you've got less rectification work to be done, you've got less rework to be done, you know what it is you should be doing. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. So Joe, what do you think about, are you okay with continuing this conversation for next week? So I think there's so much you can do in pricing.
It's a massive, massive area, isn't it? And we'd love to have your questions as well. So what have you been thinking as you've been watching and listening into the show? How are you doing pricing at the moment? And what questions, what would you love to, if you could ask anybody anything about pricing, what would you ask? Ask us. Leave a note in the comments, or you can DM us, and we will make sure we pick it up in the next show and help you out with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, just in terms of it's a statement of fact as opposed to arrogance, me and Joe between us have got about 50 plus years. I know we don't old enough to have that number of years of experience, but we've got decades of experience between us in lots of different areas of business. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and how you go about pricing your own products and services. You do it literally by flipping a coin. Do you have some alternative methods? We've got a lot more methods to actually to relay to you next time we meet. And so I would just say, think about it clearly, get those objectives, think about the psychology, and listen, you can always change pricing. So it doesn't mean it's the only price you ever charge, but make sure as a bare minimum you recoup costs, make sure it fits the objectives that you want. But yeah, remember, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, Absolutely, and good luck with it. Come and let us know how you get on, and we're here to help. So give us your questions, and we'll help you out. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. It's going to be middle of May, isn't it?
Yeah, middle of May, I think, is the next time we'll
Yeah.
get this conversation.
Yeah, because I'm having a bit of a holiday, so that'll be nice.
She deserves it, and that's very unusual for Jo to take holidays, but I think it was good. We're going to wish her having a good time. Are you going to share with everyone what you're doing, or shall we keep that as a secret?
Well, I'm hopefully, all being well, walking the last 120k or so of the Camino de Santiago in northwest Spain, and I'm doing the end of the Portuguese route, which is still in Spain. It's the top of Portugal, up into Santiago de Compostela. I'm keeping my eye on the Spanish heat wave that's being spoken about at the moment, and but yeah, whatever happens, I'm just going to really enjoy walking by the sea and then through the Spanish countryside.
Brilliant. 120 km worth 30 legs in a swimming pool look quite meagre. Thanks. Listen, have a good week. Enjoy your weekend. Catch you in mid-May.
Bye for now.